Welcome to the Empowerment Zone, brought to you by South-Dade NAACP, where we share trustworthy information, uplift local voices, and connect you to the resources and pathways that support thriving, one conversation, one connection, and one action at a time. It is where South Miami-Dade listens, learns, and leads.
Hi, and welcome to this episode of the Empowerment Zone. I'm your host, Harold Ford, and we'd love to welcome Ms. Sui Chung.
Thank you so much.
Ms. Chung, thank you for coming.
I appreciate being here. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Right. Please share a little bit about yourself, your being in South Florida, the work that you do.
Thank you. Well, I've been here since 2003. I've been doing immigrant defense really my whole career. I did start right after law school at the Board of Immigration Appeals in D.C., and then I came to South Florida with the intent of doing immigrant defense work. I was really moved by some of the cases that I saw at the appellate court with the Haitian community, and I really wanted to have that opportunity to make a difference and represent those cases.
Okay. It's my understanding you're with the Americans for Immigrant Justice organization.
Yes, I am.
Tell us about the organization, how it started, how you got involved with it.
Well, we've been in South Florida for 30 years. We are one of the lead organizations, I would say, in the United States. We have really a diverse body of work that we do in immigrant defense, and I think that's what makes Americans for Immigrant Justice different, which is from the ground up, whether it is the direct services all the way to impact litigation and policy work. We're involved in every aspect of that. So the direct service is really serving the state of Florida, and then on to the impact litigation and policy being national in scope. Our founding executive director, Cheryl Little, founded the organization 30 years ago. We're celebrating our 30th anniversary. And I like to say that Florida and South Florida, Miami, would look different if it weren't for Americans for Immigrant Justice and the work that we've been doing defending immigrants and really pushing for due process and pursuing really defense of immigrants and what they're eligible for, with various moments in time, immigrants needing to pursue humanitarian relief, protections for children, protections for domestic violence victims. I feel like the landscape of Miami and how successful this city is, it really is a city of immigrants, and Americans for Immigrant Justice contributed to that wonderful story.
Right. And it's with immigrants that allowed Miami actually to be incorporated
yes.
in the state of Florida. So the immigrant population has been very instrumental in where we are, where we come from, and where we are today. So yeah, I appreciate the work that you all do. And I'm wondering, what type of services does AIJ provide?
We have different programs. We provide defense to children, survivors of violence, domestic violence, trafficking. We represent families, mixed status families, those who are detained. That's become increasingly important. We have a pro bono arm trying to encourage others to come forward to partake in representation. More than 70% of immigrants don't have counsel. Really, the key to being successful in any complicated legal process is to have counsel. So immigrants have more than 10 times more likelihood of prevailing on what they're eligible for, legally eligible for, with the assistance of counsel. So we really find that our pro bono program is very important. And then we also have, as I stated, our impact litigation and policy arm, which very important work being done when we see so many immigrants impacted by a particular issue, needing to address it in a large-scale manner. For example, Everglades Detention Center, Alligator Alcatraz. We participated in that litigation. We were co-counsel in that matter, and I'm not certain if individuals there would have received legal assistance as quickly as they did had we not been involved in that litigation.
Wow. So that's awesome. I'm glad to hear and glad for the work that you all do here in South Florida. Let's talk a little bit about U.S. immigration history, because we know
a big topic.
a lot that's transpired since our inception as a country, and we're gaining our independence. And so throughout our, like I said, inception, we've seen how immigrants have come into America, made an impact. And then even at certain times, legislation had been passed to kind of either stop, stifle, or go through this whole process of deportation. So can you share a little bit with the audience what U.S. history, immigration history has looked like and evolved over the years?
Well, I think a really important marker is the fact that a lot of people today talk about, well, we did it the right way. This is how we did it. But with the evolution of law, there's different systems in place and processes in place. And what one may have done in the 1930s or the 1920s might look different than the 1960s and today. And so, I think in terms of a starting point in conversing about it, we have to recognize those evolutions that you're talking about. One really, I think, important piece is that this country probably would have looked very different if we didn't have the Chinese Exclusion Act. Mm-hmm. It really prevented Asian immigration from coming in, and other populations too throughout time. So that's just one example. What I like to talk about when we talk about history, because more modern history, is that our immigration laws haven't had significant change since 1996. And really, people were not using the internet. We looked really different as a country. And because of that, people were wrangling with a system that is antique at this point and difficult because it doesn't reflect what we need today, our economy, what we need today, and the restrictions that were imposed. So one of the big items that I like to mention is that in 96, these 3 and 10-year bars came up. So even individuals who are able have a immigrant petition ready for them, upon exiting the country, if they've been here longer than 1 year, they will have a 10-year bar to returning, even though that immigrant petition is available to them. So that's essentially trapped millions of people in the country who have that approved petition. It's just there for them to take. But because of these blockages, they're not able to finish step 2. And so I think that that's where there's a lot of misunderstanding when we're talking to the American public, is that people are engaging in the correct processes. They just take a really long time, or their part 2 or part 3 prevents them from finishing that process, when previously that process may have been available to them before 1996. Another item that I like to discuss is that, people always talk about, there was a change in law. There was a change in law. But really, everything that we're seeing today, these are executive decisions, executive interpretations and policies of those 96 laws. And another item that's incredibly important is that our immigration court system and our appellate system in the immigration world is through the executive branch. It is not an independent court. So a lot of times, people think about, well, go to the courts, but it is housed within that executive branch. It's called the Executive Office for Immigration Review. And so this independence causes a lot of problems, and we see distinctions based on where we are on the political landscape. And these interpretations really impact how people can pursue their claims and seek those benefits that they're eligible for, legally eligible for, or humanitarian protections that they're eligible to apply for.
Okay. And I do recall between 2016 and 2020, there was an attack for what appeared to be an attack or some level of reforming of immigration courts, with the whole border issue that was brought up. And now, since 2024 up to now, I'm not hearing and seeing that, but can you kind of give us a little insight on what's going on in the immigration court system? Have we recovered from the reforms, or has there been any changes, the reforms that were previously, I guess you could say, instituted versus to where we are now and what we're seeing on the deportation front?
So there has been a big push in terms of trying to go to the Hill and get an independent immigration court. Those efforts have not been realized. They haven't been fulfilled. So we don't have an independent immigration court. I think previously, under the prior administration, as I stated, these executive interpretations and maybe the tone of how decisions were coming out were different. Right now, as what we're seeing it is constant what's coming out of what is the appellate court for immigration, and an undoing of decisions that have been longstanding and provided ability for people to finish their process or receive benefits. And so it is of grave concern to the immigrant defense bar that so many of our immigration judges have been fired. And so that has really people who have been on the bench for a long time, people who are newer on the bench, and the appointments that occurred during the preceding administration was more of a variety of the bar, the legal bar. So we had prosecutors, we had former nonprofit attorneys, we had just a different landscape, professors who went on to be immigration judges, and we saw, and we continue to see, wide firings. And so this, I would like to hope and think that any type of judicial or quasi-judicial system would give that diversity, that we do have that diversity, in terms of how claims are looked at. But right now, because of these mass firings, we have, tremendous concern about the future of immigration adjudications.
Wow. And that is concerning. That is concerning. So how do we, meaning as an organization, as individuals, and even community members, when we look at the state of immigrants and immigrant families, sometimes they may feel a sense of helplessness as well as potential hopelessness. How do we speak to them, or how does AIJ speak to that particular circumstance?
I like to, my mentor, Ira Kurzban, he's a very, very renowned attorney, of course, and based in Miami, and nationally and internationally. And he always says, keep fighting. And I think that's what sustains us as a community, as well as attorneys, that we just have to keep pushing forward. And we do have wins, though I'm not sure what the narrative is on in terms of the closure of a really atrocious place where there's so many terrible things that occurred, like Alligator Alcatraz. But for us, it's a win that it's been closed. And it is that we pushed and tried. And if attorneys and the community did not speak out, there were people outside of Alligator Alcatraz every single day, and they weren't attorneys. And then attorneys pushing. And so I want to hope that so long as people understand what's happening, that human nature, they want to do something. They want to speak out. They want to help. I think that the problem we have today is the messaging and the information that people are receiving. So, for example, Florida's #1 in arrests. I think that people see the imagery from New York. They see it from Los Angeles. They definitely saw it in Minnesota, Chicago. But we are #1. And it's because we have these invasive, what's called 287G agreements, where there's cooperation between law enforcement and ICE. Law enforcement, they're not ICE officers unless this agreement exists. So every one of the 67 counties in Florida has signed this agreement. Many municipalities, even universities, colleges. Florida is #1 in these agreements. It's really just the silent raids are happening every single day. And I'm not sure if our brothers and sisters out there, our community members really are understanding that, because it's silent. They're not seeing, glass being broken, weapons being drawn. They're not seeing some of the images that we may have seen over 2026 and 2025. And it is nonetheless, it's no less harmful to families, to children, to our next generation in terms of the impact to the families. And Florida is a leader in terms of how many deaths there are in immigration detention. And I think the average something in 2026 is every 8 days an immigrant is dying. And we are the lead in that. And we have to look at that long and hard and say, what are we doing to people when they're in detention? And less than 2% of the newly filed deportation cases are based on a criminal issue. So these are things that I think the American public, Florida, is not understanding and reacting to because it's being done so silently here in Miami, in our state. And we were told it was the worst of the worst. The predators, the terrorists, the dangers, and it's just simply not true. It is our families. It is people who have been here a long time paying their taxes. And the impact on our economy, our Florida economy, is so tremendous. And when we're talking about our Haitian community that is going to be affected so deeply by the undoing of TPS, I think that, people say, well, that's why the word temporary is in there, because it's temporary. But truly, how can we return Haitians to Haiti in the conditions, the danger, the violence that's waiting for them? So many have been here, and we didn't take that extra step to find a pathway for permanency. And one other item that I think people don't know is that every time Haitians renewed that TPS, they were fingerprinted, they were background checked. These are not the people that are dangerous to our community. They're contributing. They're our healthcare workers, hospitality. They're supporting our economy. We will see the tremendous effects on Florida if we don't do anything for our Haitian community.
And then speaking of Haiti, if I'm not mistaken, that we have a travel ban. So
yes.
We're not encouraging Americans to visit Haiti.
That's correct.
Yeah, we're going to see people who have really built a life here and back to Haiti who haven't done anything criminally. Now, help us understand also, my understanding is immigration is a civil matter, but it's been criminalized to a different degree than we've seen, I guess, in the past. Now, it doesn't mean individuals who are immigrants may not have committed crimes, but when you've been led to believe that there's millions of people who are immigrants who are out here committing all these crimes, and then you find out there is a deportation promise of we're going to deport this many people. You didn't say this many criminals. You're just saying you're deporting this many people. So being that it's a civil matter, how do we wrestle, or how does AIG look and try to address the matter as from that particular standpoint?
Well, I think that's a really important question for us to think about, is that even in a criminal context, we're not even talking about immigration, which is civil. Mm-hmm. And people who are in the immigration process are pursuing benefits they're eligible legally for, or humanitarian protections that we've agreed to on the international landscape. We're not even talking about that. But even in a criminal process, there is mechanisms for process to occur, whether it's the appointment of counsel,
due process.
There's due process. Not to say that there aren't very embedded issues in the criminal universe, but just comparing it to the immigration world, there is this access to counsel, as well as this look of what we call prosecutorial discretion. And I try to bring it to our day-to-day life. When you're going 65 and a 55, when a 12-year-old steals a pack of gum, there's elements of what we call prosecutorial discretion. And that's the distinction between prior times and today, is that we're not taking that extra moment for prosecutorial discretion, which is impacting the due process. So prosecutorial discretion, how long have you been here? Have you been paying your taxes? Do you have a criminal history? Do you have U.S. citizen children? Do you have elderly that you're caring for? All of these types of questions come into this concept of prosecutorial discretion. It's also even more serious than that when we talk about prosecutorial discretion as it relates to survivors of violence. So domestic violence victims, they might have something pending that they're waiting for, and it takes years to resolve these cases before immigration. And it could be that they need to call the police, but because we have the 287G agreements and the force multiplier, and it's hard to tell what's happening in that moment, it could be they end up with an arrest without that understanding and thinking of what really happened here, and that second layer of let's see what's going on here. So really that pause, as opposed to let's get our numbers up. It's big business, this immigration detention world. The strapping of, the electronic monitoring, who's getting paid for it? the flights, who's getting paid for it? Who was bringing water into Alligator Alcatraz and taking it out? This is big business. And so when we're talking about the explosion of immigration detention, we can talk and say, oh, it's because immigrants are dangerous to society. We got to get them all out of here. This is a narrative that has been created in order to justify all this money. And it's Florida money too. We're talking everything that happened with Everglades. That's Florida's money. That's Florida's money. And I want to remind taxpayers, we are agreeing to this. We have agreed to have this system of such trauma and human rights violations because we're paying for it. We're paying for all this ICE enforcement. But when we have elderly that need care, we need health care, we need better school systems. There's so many other things we could be investing in as a society, but we've given billions to this enforcement regime where statistics constantly show that immigrants have a lower rate of criminality than U.S.-born citizens. And so we have to just think about who's giving us information and how are we processing it and why are we reacting this way. And I think that if we think back to our own family's histories and journeys and the various struggles that people have had over time, that we have to consider that this is a moment in time where we're just not getting accurate information.
It's interesting. You mentioned about ICE and the deportation centers. One of my daughter's classmates recently was picked up by ICE and taken to Key West. He goes to school at the MDC at Homestead campus. Picked up, taken to Key West, then flown, I think, to Wisconsin or somewhere. The family had to come up with a bond, which really put a strain on them before he was released. So when you talk about the monetary aspect, just on that one experience alone, I have to wonder, is this really about public safety and criminality? Or is it about the monetary exchanges that are going on? As you said, there's state dollars that are being paid, federal dollars that are being handed out. Now they're putting people on monitors. Those monitors somebody's got to pay for them. So when we look at this, and once someone has been reached the deportation center, what should they do, or what should that family do to try to assist in getting their loved one back or finding out what's going on in this process?
So I can tell you how it works, with Americans for Immigrant Justice. We have a variety of mechanisms to try to give information to the community and protect the community as best as we can. And with other partners throughout the state, we created what is a rapid response network. And many states have done this. Americans for Immigrant Justice, we were one of the leads in creating what we call the RAISE network, the Rapid Alliance for Immigrant Safety and Empowerment. It took a long time for us to come up with the right acronym. And there's a website with basic information as well as a free number to call. And that's when an enforcement action is occurring in the moment and somebody's going to need counsel right away or to document. There are situations where people have been physically harmed in the course of arrest. We've seen the images. I'm not stating something that we haven't all seen in news articles. And so that is our first line of defense. If somebody is in detention, already in detention, and wants to speak to an attorney and have a consultation, we have a free hotline at Americans for Immigrant Justice. And I have to say, we received more than 20,000 calls in 2025, and we answered 13,300 of those. And this is us with limited resources. It is, again, it's something like only about 70% of people have counsel. That's with Americans for Immigrant Justice in that mix. And so it was really a big ordeal, a very big responsibility, but we felt it so important because people kept on telling us, no one else is answering the phone.
Wow.
So you're the only ones who are answering the phone. And it was not just people calling from detention. It was family members, girlfriends, grandmothers, just everybody, neighbors calling because the sweep is so wide in Florida and so invasive that they don't know where to go. They don't know where to turn to. We represent individuals who are 200% of the poverty guidelines. We assist those who are low income, but we conduct intakes and consultations when people call our hotline so that there can be some snapshot or assessment of where they are in their process and whether they have completed a process. Some people have been deported, ordered deported on paper, and they're not aware. They may have been ordered deported at age 12, 16, or they may have been recently deported, didn't receive the notice. And that really affects what we can do in terms of assisting them, because that case is done, it's closed. And so those mechanisms for relief or protection have to happen within a universe of open proceedings. So it gets legally complicated, but that's really the first, line of questioning, and it's comprehending where somebody is in the lifeline of their immigration case.
Gotcha. Now, I don't want us to lose time without talking about, I think it's the Lucha
Yes.
program.
Yes.
Please share. What is that?
That is a specialty program where we have attorneys, advocates, paralegals that are particularly trained in supporting individuals who are survivors of violence, domestic violence, trafficking, victims of violent crimes. And the inception of the program really is that we really have to take care of these communities and be able to listen even more. Just like we have our children's unit, we listen more deeply and with more resource and with more awareness, because they are extra vulnerable. And so we have partnerships all over the landscape, whether it is public defenders, whether it is the state attorney's office. We receive referrals because people are survivors of violence and they are eligible for protections on the Immigration and Nationality Act. And so this is a specialty program. We try to provide the support. But again, the invasiveness of the 287G agreements, there are a lot of survivors, victims who are not reporting crimes because they might have a brother or a grandmother in the house that doesn't have status, or they themselves don't. But, this has been the back and forth in abusive relationships, which is a U.S. citizen saying, I'm going to call immigration on you if you report this.
Wow.
And so trying to ensure that these victims of violence and survivors understand that there are protections. But again, we need to ask ICE, take that second look and take that pause. This individual is eligible for protection.
Yep. And as we prepare to close, I want you to, as executive director of Americans for Immigrant Justice, what keeps you up at night?
Oh, so many things. Do I even sleep? My family would tell you, no, I don't, because I keep them up. Well, I have to say, I think really this country right now, we are, and legal service providers across the nation are really reeling from the fact that nearly 2 decades of service that so many nonprofits have done for children, abused, abandoned, neglected children, just who have suffered unimaginable harm, that the contract for representation has now shifted. And so 90 to 100 organizations were defunded. It impacts something like 26,000 children. I think that this is really something that we have to pause and take a look at. If we're abandoning children, the most vulnerable, who have suffered so much harm, and we're not giving and not providing legal counsel for them to navigate such a complicated process, we have to look at ourselves and say, are we not a leader in human rights on the international landscape, that we are abandoning that commitment? Because I think that many of us in the United States think of ourselves that way, or formerly thought of ourselves that way, that compared to other nations, a North Korea, an Iraq, or some other nation, that we have some systems and some laws in place to ensure due process. And so I think that we're deeply concerned about the future of children, and it's not just immigrant children, but the next generation. It's 145,000 or more U.S. citizen children being impacted by a parent being subjected to arrest or deportation. It is our next generation, and it's the friends of this next generation. So is this the kind of country we want to live in, where there's people have to show their papers, you have to justify who you are, there's profiling, are you an immigrant or not immigrant? Those are not questions, we're people, and we need to pursue that understanding and thinking that we want to build communities that are not based on this person belongs here and that other person belongs there. So I can only hope that people dig in and remember what their own families' histories are and those journeys may have been, so that we can continue building progress.
Thank you. How can the community get in touch with Americans for Immigrants?
Well, I have all the information here, and I will read it because our detention program, our free hotline is 786-454-8554. Domestic violence victims can call 305-573-1106. And then I also referred to our RAISE, our Rapid Response Network. It's RAISE, RAISE.is. And I encourage people to go to the Americans for Immigrant Justice website, aijustice.org. All this information is there, and methods of getting a free consultation with us so that we can determine what you're eligible for. One last item I do want to state is we do have family preparedness clinics every single week and consultations every single week. And so individuals can try to prepare their families for the future.
Well, thank you, Madam Executive Director. I appreciate you coming and spending this time with us. And with that said, thank you all for tuning in to this episode of the Empowerment Zone. We look forward to seeing you at the next one. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us in the Empowerment Zone, brought to you by South-Dade NAACP, where information becomes action, voices become movements, and community becomes change. We hope today's conversation inspired you to stay informed, stay engaged, and stay empowered. Remember, our voices are strongest when they are heard at the ballot box. Voting and voter registration are powerful tools that help shape our schools, neighborhoods, leadership, and future. Encourage someone to register, make a plan to vote, and continue doing your part to strengthen our community. And don't forget to email your feedback, thoughts, and/or suggestions for topics that you want to hear about to podcast@southdade.naacp.org. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep leading, because together we are building a stronger South Miami-Dade, one conversation at a time.